The sprawling Korth station floated silently against the cold backdrop of the Regari expanse, a massive outpost where countless species met in fragile truce. Its twisting corridors and neon-lit plazas had long been a crossroads for war veterans, diplomats and mercenaries alike. Here peace was a currency traded as fiercely as guns and grudges. Captain Dana Rourke stepped off the shuttle, her boots clicking sharply on the metal floor. A thin, tight line of scar cut across her ribs, jagged and pale beneath the edge of her uniform. It was a scar that belonged to legends whispered in fear, the bite of the Zarguth. A hush rippled through the crowd gathered near customs. Eyes, some alien with scales or fur, others humanoid but no less sharp, turned toward her like predatory beasts. The scar was unmistakable, a mark no one expected a human to survive. Varzek felt the shift immediately. Commander Varzek, a battle-worn Threxian veteran, stood apart from the cluster of curious onlookers. His mottled green skin was etched with scars earned in dozens of campaigns. His jaws clenched instinctively as his gaze locked on Dana's side. The bite pattern was clear, rows of serrated teeth deep enough to puncture armor. He remembered the ambush, the snarls in the dark, the explosive violence, the crushing weight of the Zarguth's jaws around his teammate's throat. The predator was a ghost and a nightmare all at once. It never missed. No one ever lived. But here she was, alive, standing tall, not trembling, not begging, just calm. Varzek's throat tightened. How? The crowd parted subtly as Dana passed, tension humming in the air. Aliens whispered in their native tongue, speculating. Some clutched weapons tighter. Others exchanged worried glances. The station was no stranger to danger, but this was something different, a living defiance of an apex predator's fatal bite. Dana's boots echoed down the hall toward the customs bay. She ignored the stares. Her mind was already working, scanning schedules, security protocols, and the fragmented reports of unrest spreading through the station. She wasn't here for pleasantries. This was a mission, and a test. Behind her, Varzek followed at a distance drawn by a mix of duty and disbelief. He was a man who had survived horrors most species never dreamed of, yet this human stirred something in him that he could not ignore. In a shadowed alcove near the docking bay, Varzek exhaled heavily, his breath fogging the cold air. Memories flooded back, his squad caught in a Zarguth trap. The screams, the smell of burning flesh, the futile struggle against the monster's relentless jaws. Most of his unit had been torn apart before he barely escaped with his life. The bite of the beast still fresh in his mind. His eyes narrowed. He had faced death before, but the fact that Dana carried that same wound, and survived, sent a ripple of unease through his veteran's pride. A voice crackled over the station's comm channels, interrupting the momentary silence. Security alert. Unauthorized movement detected in docking sector 7. All personnel remain on alert. The announcement was routine, but to Varzek, it sounded like a warning drum. The predator's shadow was never far. Dana paused by a glowing hollow screen, her fingers brushing the controls as she checked her contact's credentials. Varzek, she said without turning, I don't want trouble. I'm here on official business. The Threxian's eyes flickered with cautious respect. Trouble finds us all, he replied, especially those who bear scars like yours. Her gaze sharpened, and for the first time the faintest edge of a smile cracked her stoic mask. Not all scars mark defeat, she said. Some mark survival. Varzek considered this quietly. The station's usual hum seemed to fade beneath the weight of unspoken histories, of battles fought, and of prey who became hunters. As they moved deeper into the station, the crowd's whispers followed them like ghosts. Tales of the Zarguth's bite had long been warnings in the dark, stories told to frighten recruits, to remind soldiers that no matter their training, the predator was an unstoppable force of nature. But Dana Rourke was rewriting those stories, with every step. The smoke hung heavy in the dimly lit bar where warriors gathered, a sanctuary of worn metal and faded banners from battles long past. The smell of burnt synthale mixed with the low murmur of voices, gravelly laughs, clipped orders, and the occasional clink of cups. Commander Varzak sat hunched at the far end, nursing a bitter drink that burned like the memories it stirred. Around him clustered a handful of Threxian veterans, their scales dull under the flickering light. Eyes turned toward the newcomer's scar, whispered questions hanging in the air like a challenge. Varzak took a long breath, the weight of his words settling before he spoke. The Zarguth, he began, voice rough as crushed stone, is not just a predator. It is the perfect hunter. Claws that tear through armor like paper, jaws strong enough to crush bone and shatter skulls, and teeth that lock down its prey so tight it does not let go until death. He glanced around the circle. His listeners knew this story too well. The Zarguth was a living nightmare, a ghost stalking the shadowed edges of every war zone. And their bite, Varzak added, tapping the side of his head, is poison. Not venom, but something worse. An infection that breaks the mind before it breaks the body. No one who bears the mark lives long. A hush fell over the group. The scars that decorated their skin told tales of survival, but none carried the bite of the Zarguth. From the corner of the room, a grizzled alien soldier leaned forward. And this human, he said with a low growl, carries that mark and breathes still? Varzak's gaze hardened. She does. Captain Dana Rourke, survivor of the impossible. A ripple of disbelief ran through the veterans. Humans, often dismissed as fragile or inexperienced by older species, rarely commanded such respect in their presence. A sharp noise cut through the murmur, a low guttural growl vibrating from the bar's outer airlock. All eyes snapped to the door as security droids snapped to attention. The growl swelled, primal and fierce, shaking the metal walls. Varzak's claws clenched the table. The Zarguth shadow lingers, he muttered. Dana stepped into the bar, her presence commanding even in the chaos. She moved deliberately, scars and all, carrying the weight of the past, but the certainty of the present. Your legends don't scare me, she said plainly, voice calm, but edged with steel. I know what they can do, but I also know what we can do back. Varzak watched her, the weight of his suspicion slowly turning to grudging respect. Tell me how, he said. Tell us all. She settled in among the veterans, the air thick with tension and curiosity. My unit was ambushed, Dana began, voice steady but eyes flashing with memory. Zarguth hunts alone, but it's smart. It isolates, and it kills with precision. It took out most of us before I even saw it. She paused, fingers tracing the scar beneath her sleeve. The bite wasn't a death sentence. For me, because I fought. Not like soldiers trained in discipline or strategy, but like a cornered animal. I grabbed its jaws and held on. I clawed and bit back. I made it hurt. The veterans exchanged looks. This wasn't the story of a survivor, but of a fighter who refused to die. Most think the Zarguth hunts for sport, Dana continued. It doesn't. It hunts to kill, to dominate. But it never expects the prey to fight back like we did. Varzak's eyes darkened. He could smell the truth in her words. A primal, terrifying truth. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, ruthless when cornered. Suddenly, the bar's power flickered. The growl returned, louder, closer, and with it came the sharp echo of claws scratching metal. The crowd tensed, weapons drawn. Dana's gaze sharpened. It's here. Varzak stood, muscles coiling. Then let's see if your bite scares the beast. The veterans around them gripped weapons and prepared for what was coming, a battle not just of strength, but of wills. In the shadow of Korth Station, where legends lived and died, the Zarguth shadow had returned, and the true hunt was about to begin. The narrow corridor hummed with the soft thrum of Korth Station's life support systems, but beneath that mechanical heartbeat pulsed a far darker rhythm. Commander Varzak moved with a predator's caution, muscles tense as he followed Captain Dana Rourke through the maze of metal walls and glowing panels. His green eyes narrowed, watching her every step. The scar across her ribs, barely visible beneath her uniform, seemed to burn with a story he could barely fathom. How had she survived the Zargoth's bite? How had she endured what no other species dared face and lived? At last, in a secluded alcove shielded from prying eyes, Varzek halted. The flickering light above cast shadows over his battle-hardened face. "Tell me," he growled, voice low but laced with a mix of anger and awe. "How did you survive the bite that breaks all others? No one escapes the Zargoth's jaws without death following close behind." Dana didn't flinch. Her gaze held his steady, fierce. "I didn't escape," she said quietly. "I fought." Varzek's claws twitched. "Fight? What kind of fight? The Zargoth doesn't leave opponents standing." She took a breath, the memory sharpening in her eyes. "It ambushed us in the Narration caves. There were 5 of us. It tore through the first 2 before I even saw it. I was pinned beneath the beast when it bit me." The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. "But I didn't scream or struggle to free myself like prey. I grabbed its mandibles. I bit down with everything I had. I held on. Every moment I stayed alive, I clawed, punched, bit. Like a cornered animal." Varzek finished, voice rough. Dana nodded. "I was the last one left. I was bleeding, broken, and it thought it had won. But I didn't give it the satisfaction." The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken respect and growing tension. "You show no fear," Varzek said at last. "Humans, you are different. You do not die easily." "It's not about fear," Dana said, her voice steady. "It's about refusing to be broken." The veteran stared at her, a flicker of something unfamiliar in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe even grudging admiration. "Most species," he said slowly, "know when to run, when to surrender. But you—" He shook his head. "You fight like a storm that never ends." Dana's gaze hardened. "Because if you don't fight, you die." For a moment, neither spoke. Then the distant clang of a heavy door echoed through the corridor, an unwelcome reminder of the station's fragile peace. Varzek's jaw tightened. "This station may be neutral ground, but the Zargoth's reach is long. Your scar is a warning to all of us. It tells a story that could change everything." Dana took a step forward, her voice dropping. "I didn't come here to rewrite stories. I came to stop the next attack before it starts." He studied her closely. Here was a human who carried the bite of the deadliest predator in the galaxy, and yet she stood ready to face the threat again. "Then show me," Varzek said, the challenge clear in his tone. "Show us all how a human survives the predator's bite." Dana's eyes glinted with resolve. "Watch closely. This time, we won't just survive. We'll hunt." Behind them, the corridor's lights flickered again, shadows dancing like specters against the walls. Somewhere beyond, the station thrummed with whispered rumors of danger and the echo of claws scratching metal. They moved out together, the veteran and the survivor, a pair bound by scars and unspoken promise. The Zargoth's shadow was not yet lifted. The cramped briefing room buzzed with restless energy. Veterans from multiple species, each carrying their own scars and stories, had gathered at Dana Rourke's invitation. The low hum of machinery was a constant reminder that Korth Station was a fragile island of uneasy peace amid a galaxy fractured by war. Dana stood at the front, her scar exposed beneath the rolled-up sleeve of her uniform, catching the pale blue light. The jagged bite was a map of pain and survival, a living testament that none of these warriors could ignore. "I want you to understand exactly what happened," Dana said, her voice steady but raw with memory. "Not just to me, but to all of us." She paused as eyes fixed on her, some skeptical, others wary. The stories of humans surviving the Zargoth's bite were so rare they bordered on myth. "My unit was ambushed on Narration's western ridge," she began. "We knew the Zargoth hunted alone, so we set a trap. We were ready for an ambush, except we weren't ready for one." A sharp breath swept through the room as the veterans leaned closer. It came out of the shadows, faster than any animal should be able to move. It tore through our perimeter with brutal precision, killing the first 2 instantly. I barely had time to react before it was on me. Dana's fingers brushed the scar again, the surface rough and pale. The bite, its jaws locked onto my ribs, crushing muscle and breaking bone. But I held on. I twisted, grabbed its mandibles with my bare hands and bit down hard. A veteran Threxian's jaw tightened. "You bit back?" Dana nodded. "With everything I had." I clawed at its eyes, struck its throat with the butt of my rifle, and screamed like a wild thing. She swallowed hard. I don't think it expected me to fight that way. It tried to shake me loose, but I wouldn't let go. The room was silent except for the hum of the station. No one spoke for a long moment. Eventually, my unit regrouped and fired plasma charges at the beast. It collapsed, badly wounded but alive. I was barely conscious when they pulled me away. Her eyes met Varzek's across the room. The Threxian's face was unreadable, but his claws flexed involuntarily. "You survived," he said quietly, "where others would have died." "Not just survived," Dana replied. "I fought. I didn't see it as a miracle. I saw it as necessary." A quiet murmur spread among the veterans. For many of them, the idea of fighting the Zargoth on equal footing was unthinkable. An alien soldier from the Wreck clan broke the silence. "You didn't run. You didn't surrender. You fought back like a cornered beast." Dana's gaze hardened. "Exactly. When you're cornered, you do what you have to. Humans don't just survive. We adapt and strike back with everything we've got." The room shifted as whispers turned to nods and murmurs of respect. Varzek cleared his throat, drawing their attention again. "We've been taught to fear the Zargoth's bite as a death sentence. But Captain Rourke's story changes everything." He looked directly at Dana. "Your scar isn't just a mark of survival. It's a symbol of defiance, a warning that the prey can become the hunter." Dana gave a small, grim smile. "That's the story I want every soldier out there to know." Suddenly, the station's lights flickered and dimmed momentarily, sending a ripple of unease through the room. Varzek's gaze hardened. "The Zargoth's shadow is longer than we thought." As the veterans rose, the buzz of whispered rumors filled the air. Dana's tale was no longer just a story. It was a call to arms. Outside, the cold silence of Korth Station masked a dangerous truth. The Predator's bite might no longer be a death sentence, but its threat was far from over. News traveled fast on Korth Station. In a place built on fragile alliances and old grudges, rumors spread like wildfire. And Captain Dana Rourke's story of survival against the Zargoth had ignited a firestorm. In the cramped mess hall, the usual clatter of trays and low hum of conversation was replaced by a low murmur of disbelief. Groups of soldiers, mercenaries, and civilians leaned in close, exchanging hushed theories and wary glances. "No one survives the Zargoth's bite," whispered a scarred Freck warrior to a nearby Dracarian sniper. "Except humans?" A young Threxian recruit stared wide-eyed as older veterans exchanged grim looks. The legend of the Zargoth was one of absolute terror. It was the reason few dared to hunt beyond the station's perimeter, and why every security detail was doubled. Yet now, those stories felt unsettled. Varzek moved through the crowd, his presence commanding respect even from those who whispered. He caught fragments of conversations as he passed, the disbelief, the fear, and an unexpected thread of grudging respect. Humans were different. They laughed in the face of death, bore scars that told stories of brutal survival, and fought with a relentless ferocity few other species could match. He paused near a group of human soldiers, their faces grim but resolute. "Is it true?" one asked quietly. "Did Captain Rourke really survive the Zargoth's bite?" Varzek looked at their determined faces and nodded slowly. "Yes, and that changes everything." The ripple of fear was not born from doubt. It was born from understanding that the balance of power was shifting. Meanwhile, Dana sat alone, in a dim corner of the station's observation deck, gazing out at the vast emptiness of space. The stars were cold and distant, but her mind was crowded with memories of blood, pain, and the fierce will to survive. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Varzek approached, his steps measured. "You carry more than a scar," he said, quietly. "You carry the weight of what humans are capable of. That unsettles many here." Dana met his gaze. "Good. They should be unsettled. Because we don't just survive predators. We become the hunters." Varzek chuckled darkly. "I never thought I'd say this, but maybe it's time we learned a thing or two from humans." Before Dana could reply, the station's alarm blared, a sharp, urgent sound that sent a jolt through every soul on Korth. "Security breach," the automated voice announced. "Unknown life form detected near Docking Bay 7. All personnel on high alert." The veterans in the mess hall sprang to their feet, weapons drawn and instincts razor-sharp. Dana and Varzek exchanged a grim look. "The Zargoth shadow isn't done with us," she said. "It's coming." Chaos erupted as soldiers rushed to their stations. The once uneasy truce of Korth Station fractured under the weight of impending danger. In the midst of the turmoil, whispers grew louder, humans bearing the bite of the predator, standing unbroken. What if the Zargoth was no longer the apex threat? As the station braced for the hunt to begin again, a new fear took root. The predator had met its match. The lights in Docking Bay 7 flickered erratically, casting long, jittery shadows across the cold steel walls. The air hung heavy, almost suffocating, as if the station itself held its breath. Soldiers, their weapons drawn and eyes sharp, spread out in calculated formations, muscles coiled like springs ready to snap. Captain Dana Rourke moved with a predator's grace despite the wound still aching beneath her uniform. The scar on her ribs burned faintly with every breath she took, a constant reminder of the battle that had already scarred her soul. Yet this was far from over. "Keep your eyes open," she ordered, voice low but resolute. "The Zargoth is hunting us. We don't just survive, we fight back." Commander Varzek flanked her, every inch the battle-hardened veteran. His mottled green skin shimmered faintly under the emergency lights. "You really believe we can kill it?" he asked quietly. Dana's eyes locked on his. "We have to, or it kills us first." The door to the docking bay hissed open, revealing a blast of cold air and the silhouette of the Zargoth's massive form, a creature born from nightmares with rippling muscles, serrated claws, and jaws dripping with venomous saliva. Its eyes glowed with cruel intelligence, a hunter's cunning that sent a chill through every soul present. It moved with terrifying speed, slashing through the ranks of soldiers, tearing through armor and flesh alike. The veterans responded instantly, plasma rounds and laser blasts illuminating the battle in harsh flashes of red and blue. Dana charged forward, dodging a swipe of claw that would have ended most lives. She pressed her advantage, striking at the creature's exposed throat with a reinforced blade, an opening she'd learned to exploit from her brutal encounter. The Zargoth snarled, staggering back for a moment before lunging with renewed fury. Varzek roared a battle cry, intercepting the beast's next attack and buying Dana precious seconds. His claws slashed through the air, drawing the Zargoth's attention away from her. "This is not just a hunt," Dana shouted over the chaos. "It's a war." Around them, the station shook from the force of the struggle. Sparks flew as weapons overloaded and alarms blared, drowning out even the Zargoth's guttural roars. Despite the danger, Dana's mind remained razor-sharp. She calculated every move, every opening, pushing her body beyond exhaustion. The scar on her ribs throbbed violently, a searing pain that threatened to collapse her. But she fought on, driven by something deeper than survival, a need to prove that the human spirit was not so easily broken. Finally, with a coordinated strike, the veterans managed to pin the creature down. Dana drove her blade deep into the Zargoth's chest, the beast's roar turning into a wet, gurgling gasp. As the creature collapsed, Dana sank to her knees, chest heaving. Varzek stood beside her, his eyes unreadable, but heavy with respect. "You fought like a true predator," he said quietly. "The Zargoth underestimated the human." Dana's voice was barely a whisper. "And that mistake will cost it everything." In the aftermath, As the station began to steady, the veterans gathered around, their faces marked with exhaustion and awe. The shadow of the Zargoth had been lifted, but the scars it left behind would linger. Varzek looked at Dana, the weight of his unspoken thoughts heavy between them. "Your scar is no longer just a warning," he said. "It's a symbol of hope." Dana met his gaze, the faintest smile breaking through her weariness. "And a promise," she added, "that humanity will never be prey again." The battle had ended, but the air on Korth Station was thick with something far heavier than smoke and blood: uncertainty. Captain Dana Rourke sat in the dimly lit medical bay, her breathing steady despite the ache radiating from her ribs. The scar, raw beneath the healing gel, pulsed with a dull heat. It was a constant reminder that survival came with a price. Commander Varzek stood silently nearby, his massive frame casting a long shadow against the sterile walls. His usual, stern expression was softened by a rare hint of respect and something almost like admiration. "You carry the bite of the Zargoth," he said quietly, "yet you stand. Most would have succumbed." Dana's gaze didn't waver. "I didn't just stand. I fought." He nodded slowly. "Your defiance changes everything. It challenges centuries of fear." Outside the med bay, the station buzzed with uneasy energy. News of the Zargoth's defeat had spread quickly, rippling through the network of factions and species that called Korth home. For the first time, a glimmer of hope pierced the shadow of dread that had long hung over them. But with hope came new tensions. The leaders of the station's factions gathered in the council chamber, debating what the human survival meant for the fragile balance of power. "We must reconsider our approach to the Zargoth threat," urged a Rek elder, his voice gravelly. "If they can be fought and defeated, then our strategies must change." A Dracarian diplomat frowned. "Yet we must be cautious. Humans are unpredictable. Their resilience could spark more conflict than peace." Dana, summoned to address the council, stood tall despite the fatigue still clawing at her. "The Zargoth's bite was once a symbol of inevitable death," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "Now it is a symbol of what we can overcome. Together." She paused, locking eyes with Varzek, who nodded in silent support. "We must unite, train together, share knowledge, because the next Zargoth won't wait for us to be ready." Murmurs of agreement and skepticism rippled through the chamber. Back in the shadows of the station's lower levels, a different kind of reckoning was unfolding. Some viewed Dana's survival as a threat, an unsettling disruption to the old order. Whispers spread of factions plotting to exploit the Zargoth's defeat for their own gain. Power was shifting, and with it came the seeds of betrayal. Meanwhile, Dana retreated to the observation deck once more, staring out into the void. The scar beneath her sleeve throbbed with an ache that was more than physical, a reminder that her fight was far from over. Varzek joined her, standing silently beside her as they watched distant stars flicker in the darkness. "What comes next?" she asked quietly. He shrugged, a rare gesture of uncertainty. "We prepare, we learn, we hunt. And when the Zargoth returns, we will be ready." Dana's eyes gleamed with fierce determination. "Then let them come." The scars of the past had shaped them, but the future belonged to those who refused to bow. The cold void of space stretched infinitely beyond Korth Station's reinforced windows. But inside the station, a new warmth flickered, a spark of hope, born from scars and survival. Captain Dana Rourke stood before a gathering of veterans, soldiers, and diplomats representing a dozen species. The scars across their bodies and armor told stories of countless battles, but none more potent than the one etched on Dana's ribs. The mark of a predator's bite survived. She raised her hand, quieting the room. "We have faced the darkness and stood unbroken," Dana said, her voice steady and commanding. "The Zargoth believed their bite meant death. They believed it made them gods among hunters. But we showed them something else. We showed them resilience." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd, hope, disbelief, and a newfound respect. "Commander," Varzek stepped forward beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. Your scar, he said, is no longer a symbol of fear. It is a symbol of strength, unity, and survival. It is the legacy of the fight that binds us all. Dana's gaze swept over the room. This station, this alliance, is the beginning. We will share knowledge, train together, and prepare for what lies beyond these walls. The Zargoth's shadow may never fully lift, but we will stand taller than ever before. From the crowd, a young human recruit raised a hand, voice trembling. Captain, how do we fight when the enemy is fear itself? Dana smiled, a fierce light in her eyes. By refusing to give it power, by embracing our scars, our stories, and our will to survive. Fear is the predator of the mind. We fight it with courage. Outside, the stars glittered cold and distant, but inside the station, a new chapter had begun. The bite that once signified death had become a mark of defiance. As the crowd dispersed, Dana and Varzek lingered, watching the station hum with renewed purpose. You changed the story, Varzek said quietly. Dana traced the scar on her ribs with her fingertips. No one changes alone. We all carry the bite and the will to fight. Their eyes met, an unspoken promise passing between them. Far beyond the station, the Zargoth's presence had not vanished. Somewhere, lurking in the shadows of uncharted space, the predator waited. But now, it faced a new kind of prey, one that would hunt back,